Good morning, everyone. We're just waiting for the participants and for the attendees to join. We'll get started in a few moments, so we'll be with you shortly. Okay, so look, welcome everyone. This is our third webinar edition for 2024, and I'm delighted to bring this to you today with two amazing presenters and panelists. I am the chair of the RPMA, and we have today a thrilling discussion around fixed and periodic tenancies. What's the pros and cons? What works best for the landlord, the tenant, and also the property manager? And we really want to dig into some of the challenges and some of the successes that our panelists have had during this. This session is meant to be about informing and providing education. It does depend on the circumstances, as you'll find a lot, as to what might work best. But we thought it would be a wonderful opportunity to really debate and discuss the fixed and also periodic terms for tenancies. So joining me today, we have two titans of the industry. We have David Pearce, who is the franchisor for Pukekohe Rentals, and we also have Richard Horn, who is the business owner of Manage My Property. So David Pearce, as many of you may already know, was also the immediate past president of RPMA. He was the founding franchisee of Pinovic, and he's also previously was a real estate agent and has a wealth of experience within both sectors, both industries. Richard, as I said, is the business owner of Manage My Property. He's based in Wellington, and you'll notice from the scarf that he's wearing this morning, it's extremely cold down there. He's a property investor as well, so he understands both sides of the equation. As well as that, he's got over 20 years experience in the industry. So welcome, David and Richard. It's wonderful to have you here today.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you. So look, what we're going to do today is we're going to allow both panelists to be able to talk to us about their views, what they see as the pros and cons, and how you should use each of the periodical fixed tenancies, depending on the situation. But we're also then going to offer the opportunity for the people online to ask questions. So make sure you send them through in the chat area. I've also got a few questions as well. Look, we'll really be looking for Richard and David to provide some successes and also some failures and give real examples, so we can hopefully help educate and teach everyone some of the pitfalls, but also ways to actually thrive within the industry as well. So, look, without further ado, I am going to hand over to Richard to present first. We had a coin toss to see who would start. And Richard, the floor is yours.
Yes, looks like I lost the toss. Morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I don't think I'd call myself a titan of the industry, more a foot soldier, to be honest. This has been a long debate for a long time. A fixed term tenancy or a periodic tenancy has been put forward by investors and property managers and all sorts of people with this idea that one is right and the other one is wrong. And I think the answer is it depends. So I have developed my own philosophy for this. So it is really a philosophical question. I've developed a philosophy based on some of the investors, one in particular, who I've learned from. And what my philosophy is at the moment is a fixed term is a good thing, but it has its limitations. It's not as flexible as a periodic. Obviously, I'm stating the very obvious, but you'll often hear that a wise investor fixes their tenancies for as long as possible. And there are problems inherent in doing that. There's an upside. It gives security of tenure to the tenant. It gives potentially gives security of rental income to the property owner. And that can be a good thing if you're dealing with an investor, you know, dealing with somebody who views their rental property as a business and treat it as such. It's an enterprise that makes them money and allows them to pay off their capital assets. So it can be a good thing. I view fixed term tenancies as, I'll be cruel and say, lazy landlording. It's a little bit fix and forget in some people's minds. We do a fixed term tenancy, nothing will change over the entire period of the tenancy, and if anything changes, it's just tough, they're stuck with it. I think the glaring one is, you know, a fixed term tenancy, if your tenant wants to move out early, you've got some work involved. Or as an owner, if you want to sell and there's a fixed term in place, then you're selling your rental with an incumbent tenant, and that can be viewed as a downside as well. And tenant circumstances change all the time. They seem to happen just when you don't want them to. So it'll be a marriage breakup, or they've got a job at the other end of the country, or they're going overseas. You know, their plans change and they want out of the fixed term tenancy, and that can sometimes be a nuggety thing to deal with. You end up telling a tenant that they can't move out because you can't find somebody else to take over their tenancy. That can be a tricky situation to deal with as well. So my view is that a periodic tenancy gives more flexibility, not only for the tenant, but also for the owner. And in the current economic climate, we're finding there are more people at the moment right now selling their properties, their rental properties, because of the way that the economy is going. And they're finding it difficult because tenants are in fixed term tenancies, they can't get rid of them. My philosophy is that a fixed term tenancy is good for big family homes, 4 or 5 bedrooms. You generally find a family would move into a house like that and settle in and probably live there for years and have pets, and their kids would grow up there. Periodic tenancies, I think, are better for 1 and 2 bedroom flats or units. And I think it's easier to deal with for the simple reason that 1 and 2 bedroom flat tenants tend to change every year or 18 months or so. So I think it's a philosophical question, and I hope I've given some kind of philosophical answer to that.
Thanks, Richard. That's wonderful. I'm also just wanting to know if your view has changed with the government bringing back, proposing to bring back no reason for being able to end a tenancy.
Good point. So
yeah, whether that would change your influence or your views.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. So wind the clock back a few years to when before the changes that we're under now were in place. So yes, well, I would use a fixed term tenancy strategically. It would depend on the time of year as well. You know, I might be letting a place now and I'd say, look, we'll put you in a fixed term through to February next year. That's when everybody's on the move. It's a better time to rent a place. So yes, I go back to those days and think, well, that was a good way to do it. Then the government changed the rules and the tenant has all the power. So in our current situation, you've got to play it a wee bit different. You can have a fixed term tenancy, but the tenant can actually decide that they don't want to renew, they want to slide onto a periodic. That may change when the government does what they say they're going to do, and they're not renowned for doing that, to be frank. As you can tell by the regulation debate, which is now run out of petrol. Yeah, is the government going to backtrack on that stuff? Who knows?
Thanks, Richard. Good comments. You've got a foot in each camp at this stage, so that's good. We'll see if we can dig in a little bit further post David's speech presentation. So, David, I'll hand over to you. I believe you've got a PowerPoint presentation as well.
Yeah, I have. I like hiding behind PowerPoints. Well, so Where is it? Okay. And okay, so hopefully just everyone see that all right? Fixed term versus periodic.
Yes, that's wonderful.
Okay. Oh, all right. So I actually I'm going to agree to start off with Richard, is that it is a philosophical issue. And again, it's like a lot of things where you start off with it then predetermines. And I've found that you're able to greatly influence people, tenants and owners, if you've actually got a strong opinion. You can be an influencer as well as to what is best. But the question is, what is my preference and why? And to be honest, fixed term tenancies for me, that's my first option. And because it's a management tool for getting property owners rent 365 days of the year. And for owners, that's I've found that that's actually quite an important issue. The other thing philosophically is manager versus administrator. Under the in the dictionary, a manager is the person who's responsible for managing, and in our case, residential property. So the key part of a manager's responsibility is to manage the vacancy rate, and this can be a huge thing for owners, and proactively managing rather than responding or reacting to situations as they arise. I actually believe that the best management practice is coming from a viewpoint of how can I improve the property owner's return on investment for this property. Now, we know that it's important to actually do rent reviews annually, but also a key thing is to eliminate or significantly reduce the vacancy rate. Accountants will tell clients, I've been told, that they're quite conservative, and they'll tell clients, look, if you've got this investment property, we'll budget on 3 weeks vacancy per year. The thing is that if it was an $800 a week property, that would be $2,400 a year that they're allowing to lose. And to be really honest, that's actually close to what most property managers are getting in the way of management fees. So again, a marketing point of view can be look, I'm wanting to get you rent 365 days of the year. This could mean that we could actually help go a long way of helping you cover the management fees. So fixed term tenancies can make a significant impact in increasing your clients' return on investment and also covering your fees. Now, I want to give you an example. In the last 3 weeks or 4 weeks, this has come up as a rent roll that's available in Wellington. And on the looking at it, you think managed properties, 203. Oh yeah, average rental, 673. Average management fee, 8%. Oh, that's okay. And and then there's the arrears. But what people don't understand is there's a vacancy rate of 4%. Now, if you take the 203 properties at the 673 a week for 52 weeks of the year, that's $7 million worth of rent that's passing through your trust account. If you've got a 4% vacancy, that means that there's about $284,000 in rent that's not coming through. And in this case, it's horrific because it means that every average property, and it's not always average, there's always some worse than others, but the average for those 203 properties is that there's $1,400 per property where the owner's not getting that money. And unless we actually put a focus on your rent and reducing the vacancy rate, we could just think, oh yeah, that's okay, that's normal. But again, it doesn't have to be normal. The other point is, out of that 284,000, at 8.707% management fees, that's a potential $22,963 in increased management fees that you're not getting by not managing the vacancy rate. And I would suggest to any owners of a business, invest some of that money back into your property managers so that they can actually be a member of RPMA, they can sit their level 4 certificate, and they can also get their qualifications, their QRPM, so you can promote your business as having the best qualified property managers in your location. But anyway, That's just pushing RPMA. The other example is another rent roll that's for sale, 145 properties in Auckland. And they've got 145 properties, but they've got 15 properties vacant. That's over 10%. My concern is if you actually don't focus on the vacancy rate, you can actually cost your owners lots of money. So I can see why he's selling, because they've dropped the ball big time. That's not good property management. Right, prior to Labor, and we're doing it for years, fixed term tenancies were 60 to 90 days out. You go to Palace or whatever software you're doing and you check what's coming up. You do a rental appraisal to check the new rental rate, and then you go to the tenant and say, are you renewing or not? And if they're not, well, then they haven't got the opportunity. What was done in the past is that we'd say, all right, well, then we'll actually find another tenant if you're not actually going to renew. Now, if a tenant decides in a fixed term to break their tenancy, one important point is that they actually have to find the costs of finding a replacement tenant to take over their responsibility. Is this geared towards in the benefit of owners? Definitely. But at the end of the day, again, it's the whole point I'm making is that how else do you manage vacancy rates? Now, with the Labor-led coalition, they changed it so the tenant had the sole right to decide to renew the fixed term tenancy or move to a periodic. What I've found as a general rule is that people say they've just adopted the policy of what's done before. Most companies that I hear about, they do a year's fixed term and then they just don't even manage it from then on. So they allow it to roll on to a periodic. However, what I find is that what surprises me is they don't go to the tenant at that opportunity and say, hey, do you want to renew? Because that gives you security of tenure. There's no renovations, there's no selling, there's no family moving back. It actually is one of the key points for security for your tenancy, so you don't have to move. And I find that well over 50% say yes, unless they're actually looking to make a move in the next 12 months or 6 months or whatever. So most real estate companies, managers have not been promoting the benefit of tenants of renewing their fixed terms. The best practice would be to get the owner's permission. So one of the things that I did was say, right, the tenant makes the choice, so how about we actually make it longer? So a lot of my rental tenancy agreements have been pushed out to at least 24 months. So then I can say in the first 2 years, we've got a good hope that you'll get 0 vacancy rates, which means that's a better return for your property owner. And I just wanted to, in concluding, there's other benefits to a fixed term. One is that you find that if someone's signed in for a period of time, they're not looking around. In fact, I've found that if the tenant says that they want to break their fixed term, when you supply them what the costs are, they decide, oh no, I'll just stay. So there's been that as well. But one of the churn of tenants is one of the biggest time consumers. And again, it just means that I've found historically you have a better settled tenants if you find that they're actually tied in and they've got that security of their property. One of the other key benefits is the tenancy expires at a predetermined time. Now, what Richard would know in Wellington is traditionally where you've got people like students and they all want to leave just before Christmas, where you can take a tenancy agreement through to the start of the year in February when everyone's looking to. So again, you manage it. You're the manager. So you determine in your agreement when you set it up when the expiry is. So one, not to actually go and take periods of time like winter or just before Christmas, allowing a tenant to decide that they're going to move and hand their notice in. And it means that also that time could be the peak time of the years where you can get more inquiries and get a better rent for the property. And that's, as a manager, I think we should be doing. So, and the last point has already been discussed, is the change of government. At the moment, it's been in the tenants' court. I think that's going to, if they do what they say they're going to do, it's going to change. So we're going to have it go back. So the fixed term renewal will be at the discretion of the property manager, the person managing the property. and the tenant will no longer solely decide anymore. All right, so there we go. There's my case for fixed terms.
But thanks, David. And I was going to say that that's very, very much a case for fixed term, where Richard was a bit more flexible on both options. And I'm going to come back and just ask you a couple of questions that are counter to what you said, just to see, and we'll go to David first, just to see what the response would be. Look, you're definitely fixed is your preference, and it's based on what's the right thing to do for the landlord, from what I picked up, and also that you believe that there's better value in there for everyone. I guess Richard gave a really good example around the life stage of some tenants, and in particular those that are in 1 and 2 bedrooms. I'm interested on your views on that, because absolutely you've got to do the right thing for the landlord, but there's a sense of responsibility for the tenants as well. So are we looking after them in the right way when people that are renting 1 and 2 bedrooms may need flexibility, relationships break down, things they might need to move location? Do you soften your view on fixed only when you're dealing with I guess a different type of house and tenant?
No. And the reason is that at the end of the day, we are managers of the property. Do we want to put in tenants that are actually only going to come in and then hand their notice in after 3 months or 6 months? If there's a relationship breakup and it happens, at the end of the day, the responsibility of the property manager is to actually get them to sign a break form and to actually start getting someone to replace them as quickly as possible. And a lot of people understand that, and I think that's the key. I think it's important to actually have that control and then have that a tenancy agreement when someone comes in, that you can then fix it so that it comes up at a time that suits you. I think at the end of the day, the problem in the past, especially in Wellington with one particular company, is that they actually just got lazy, sat on their seats and said, but I actually have told everybody it's really, really important that if someone makes an intention that they want to break their fixed term, is tell them how much it's going to cost, and be very, very, the thing is that you've got to proactively and show, if it ever went to the tribunal and they apply for hardship, that you're doing everything you can to actually find a replacement tenant. And that may mean that if the rent's gone back and it's that time of the year, that you've got to have that conversation with the owner. So again, it comes back to communication. Extremely important. Not only with the tenants, but with the owners.
Thanks, David. Look, I'll go to Richard now. So Richard, I think in one of your phrases was lazy landlording for fixed. Now I know that's circumstantial, but I'm interested to understand more now that you've heard a little bit more from David. Whether or not it's a little bit more hard work at times for the property manager, but is it more about lazy property management or easier for the tenant? Your philosophy on that?
I think the main part of my view of this came, like I said before, came out of dealing with a relatively substantial investor whose properties we looked after. They were all 1 or 2 bedroom units dotted around central Wellington, and he favoured periodic tenancies. And I said, why? Everybody, all the wisdom says, lock it in. It's a guaranteed income stream, and you're in control, and he said it's because he found that with the smaller properties, things changed a lot more quickly than he would prefer, and he just found that each time a tenant gave notice and moved out, he would go in and do a bit of a paint job and put the rent up. So if you've got periodic tenancies and if they're changing hands in less than a year, you're doing something wrong. But if you've got periodic tenancies changing, you can raise the rent if the market will bear that. You can't with a fixed term. You can raise the rent, but you can only do it once a year. So that's kind of a very small circumstance, that one. But I prefer periodic for the smaller places because it's got more flexibility. And right now, and this may just be a Wellington thing, lots of our owners are selling their properties more than we've ever seen. They're selling them. They're going to market. And I think it's because, well, the economy is taking a bit of a knock. Interest rates have gone up, the price of everything has gone up. So some people are looking to pay down debt. They're selling the rental, the one rental that they've got. And some people are going, look, just give the tenants notice and we'll put the place on the market. It's like, well, no, you signed them, we've signed them for a fixed term. If you've signed them for a 24 months fixed term, you've got a job to get through that. That's a negotiation, and it can be costly. So, you know, a tenant might say, well, I'll bugger off, but you'll be paying for my removal costs. I've had that happen to us as well. So still remain that it's a philosophical question.
I just put my 10 cents. I think a lot of it is to do with education of owners. I actually even have in our management agreement, if they are actually interested in selling or having family move back in, then make sure that 3 months before the renewal takes place, they actually let us know and we'll move it on to a periodic tenants. We'll let it roll out. And so that overcomes that. But again, do we really want owners on a whim selling if this is our business? Or do we want them tied in there and let them communicate with us that they're thinking of selling so that we can actually then manage the situation?
Yeah, I'm interested in your view of tying the owners and holding on to them. I think an owner should be able to sell their property anytime they like without having to be connected to, yeah, the tenancy. I get that, but yeah, that seems rather restrictive and
don't we do that now? Don't we actually say that you've got this management agreements for a set time to make it worthwhile?
No.
You see, that's interesting, because at the end of the day, if you're going to be, otherwise you get used by owners. At the end of the day, you want to be able to put in a tenant and be able to actually make some money out of that before the churn of tenants again. You don't make any money out of that. So that's probably where we disagree the most. At the end of the day, this is an investment. It should be long term. If someone wants to, you know, do it as a whim, well, yeah, they can go, I'll refer them to your company then.
Well, I don't think it's a whim, though. I mean, again, current circumstances, lots of people are selling their properties. I don't think they've kind of gone, oh, look, let's just sell a rental and see what happens. Quite a few of them have come back to us or stayed with us because they've tried to sell and it hasn't happened. I don't think it's a whim to sell your rental. I think it's a part of the journey. Again, something that I've learned from dealing with investors over the years. I've watched them buy their first or second or third property and get up to, and one in particular, get up to about 5 or 6. And then he's gradually sold them off and he went and lived up the coast and bought a Ferrari. That wasn't a whim, that was a plan. And I enjoyed watching and learning from him what he did. So I think it's, I'm uncomfortable with tying owners into us and saying, look, no, you can't sell your house, sorry, because we're going to make money out of it. That's not part of my business ethic. That's a different discussion.
Look, I think we've all seen the change in the environment as well, as interest rates now, even though they've been going up for the last 2 years, have really bitten at the start of this year, and a lot of properties that we thought probably wouldn't have been sold, owners would have held on to, have tried to sell. Look, we're also seeing that some of them haven't been able to sell and they are coming back into the rental market. But leading on from that, if I look at the government changes that, you know, potentially will take in effect next year with regards to the 90 days notice for no reason, do you think, and I'll go to David first, do you think you're going to see a lot more demand from tenants to say, I want to renew at a fixed for 12 months, or do you think they'll be happy to roll over to periodic? Because generally what we do see is that it's split nearly 50-50. Some want a bit more flexibility. Some want to make sure they've got certainty. But with the 90 days, no reason notice coming into play, that will probably change, right? I'm just see if that's what you agree with or what you think might happen.
Well, the 90-day no reason in the past, I never, and this is the argument with renters groups, I never saw any property managers getting rid of good tenants. No. So we only use the 90 days where you had that social issue with upsetting neighbours in it, and we've shown that this ability to do the 3 strikes is just a joke. It just doesn't work effectively. So with the 90 days, you can't use that on a fixed term. But again, in managing that, if you've got a tenant who's always is just as bad, you just don't renew the fixed term. You've got the opportunity to do that and to issue the 90-day notice. So again, my point is you're the manager. You've got to manage and control the situation and not just be a responder. Does that answer your question?
Yep. Richard,
So-
any additional thoughts on that?
Damn, he's good.
Yeah, well, we've just noted that you said that. That's good. Look, David, I have got a question from the floor. You'll know the person, Carl Jackson. And the question is, under current legislation, are there any circumstances that you would not offer a fixed term initially or refix to a tenant?
There was only one where have done a kind deed, and I have regretted it since. A guy is going overseas, and he's going over for 9 months, then he's coming back for 3 months so he can get his super and then go again. But I've actually warned him that, yes, the only way we can manage this is through a periodic, but I warned him at the end of the day, do not come complaining to me when the tenant just hands their notice in after 6 months. And if this continues to happen, I'm not interested, because at the end of the day, you don't want to be keeping on just replacing tenants and being there. This is a business, and at the end of the day, you're not going to make any money out of that. So I've actually been very upfront with them. So, but that was one where I couldn't use a fixed term because at the end of the day, he said it would be for 12 months. He ended up saying, no, it's only going to be 11 months now. And again, it's just harder to find tenants for those situations. So there had to be some compromise.
Any thoughts on that, Richard? Will you agree again?
Yeah, I keep coming back to this is a philosophical thing, and specific examples. We all have specific examples of how things have worked well and how things have worked badly. And so the ultimate answer, I think I said at the very beginning of this, was it depends. We do get owners at the moment saying, new owners when they're coming on, they say, what would you advise? Fixed or periodic? And it's like, well, it depends. But in the current economic climate, a fixed term is kind of a moot point, really, because when it comes to the end of the term, the tenant doesn't have to move out if they decide to stay on. So I see it as not much use, to be honest. But if the government is going to reset things to where they were before, then yeah, I would still use fixed terms strategically.
I've got another question from the floor from Mary Nansen. Wellington rentals are very geared towards fixed term tenancies from January to January. Maybe it's because we're a university city. Because of this, during winter months, the number of tenants in the market looking for a rental is slim pickings. Most owners are well aware of this. How do you change their thinking to encourage periodic when this has been a pattern for years? If indeed you would like to, we should change it. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, how do we encourage them? Again, I would depend on the size of the property. If it's a 1 or 2 bedroom flat, I'd say periodic is a good way to go, but fixed term is a good way to go for a bigger property, 3, 4 bedrooms, family home, usually a family, a tenant family with kids and a dog. They're going to want to be at the local school and they're going to stay long term. So fixed term, I don't see any real difficulty with at all. But with the smaller places, periodic does allow you a lot more flexibility. I've got my own rentals, and they're all 2 bedroom flats actually. And when a tenant moves out, which I think is happening this weekend, boom, we're in, paint, shine the place up a bit, new curtains, weed the garden, and we can lift the rent.
And look, I think just looking at the question, I don't think it's just a Wellington university town, university city issue. From my observations, there's a lot of tenancies that do come up at the end of January, February, and so there's a lot more movement in the market around that time. Whether or not it's been property manager driven, I don't know, but it does put a lot of pressure on everyone, landlords, tenants, property managers around that time of the year to actually, I guess, transition everyone, whereas we don't have an even flow throughout the year. I guess the other reason that, as we know, as property managers in the summer, it's a lot better to show off a house than in the cold of winter. So yeah, I understand the issue with the lack of volume and change, but there are perhaps some underlying reasons behind that as well. David, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you've got Dunedin and Wellington are the sort of ones that spring to mind. But if you've got a situation where during the winter months, there's actually not very many people to choose from, well, that's even a stronger case for periodic tenancy, isn't it? To have it expiring or coming up at that time where, like in January, February, where there's a lot of people looking.
Indeed. And look, I've got not a question, but I've got a statement here from Jonathan Burke, and it's worth reading out. So, paying for a tenant's moving costs is not a considerable sum if the landlord wishes to sell, when you consider it as a percentage of their overall sale price. So that's something also to consider. Look, I'm just looking at the time. I don't have any more questions coming in, but I'll just see if there's any final words from our panelists before we look to sign off and draw this webinar to a close.
Well, I think we're all operating in different markets, and I'm very aware that Wellington is a particular market. I've always viewed the periodic option as potentially flattening out the demand over the course of the year, so that rather than January, February being mental, it would be a little bit less and there'd be more available through the year. And that's what I think is kind of happening here. But some of you guys are in Auckland, some of you are in Hamilton, so you're in very different markets. So it depends. I keep coming back to that. This is a philosophical discussion rather than a mechanical operation.
Yeah, my final comments would be that at the end of the day, we're called property managers, not property administrators, and we actually have got to manage the situation. So I think at the end of the day, we've got to be looking on behalf of our owners for their return on investment and making sure that what we can do to actually get them 365 days of the year. Otherwise, what we're doing is we actually just forget about it and let it go, and that erodes, as I've shown by those slides. So that's our job. And again, it's going to help us grow the businesses, grow the property management, if we can actually show owners that we can actually do a good job of giving them that return on investment. And again, that's the competition between property managers as well. If you're actually out there and predictions show that you've got a 99.6% occupancy rate, and others have only got an 80%, that in itself, that should be a consideration when you're making a pitch with your management fees as well.
Thank you. Look, I have had just one other question come in, again from Jonathan Burke, and the question is around fixed term break costs, whether or not they should be included or fully disclosed in the signing of the tenancy agreement. Obviously, there's information contained in the tenancy agreement about those clauses, but often, I guess the tenants are not reading in detail and fully understand that. So he's also gone on to say it's quite a surprise for the tenants with the costs. What's your views? Should we be making sure that the tenants are aware when they get into it, so there's no surprises later on for them when circumstances might change, should have they gotten into a fixed term tenancy?
I'm finding that property management is becoming more and more about being educators for owners, educate the owners, educate the tenants. So I believe, yes, if your tenancy clause, and you can highlight it when you get it signed, that it is a fixed term, and if you break, these are the sort of costs. But to follow the law now, you've also got to get out there that estimation of what it's going to cost too. And again, I have had a number who've gone through with it, but I've actually had surprisingly a number of people who say, oh no, it's not that important that I move, I'll stay now.
Yeah, the change of tenancy costs for some people are surprising. Back in the day, we just had one fee that we charged for that, and it was to discourage people from doing it. And then the government said, no, you can't do that. You need to break down the costs. And when we broke down the costs, it came to 3 times what we were charging. You know, let's make renting better. Good on you, Labour.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, look, I agree that being upfront for the tenants to be aware that there is an option to you know, sign a lease and the associated costs, approximate costs that would be aware that could be seen later on should be included. But equally, I think it's absolutely important to be able to communicate with the tenants and give them all the information and make sure that they understand the circumstances when they get into difficulty or when they want to get out of a fixed term lease. I have seen things go wrong when there's assumptions made on communications happen, as we know. You've got to make sure and check. So before action's taken, the tenant's aware of all the costs that will be involved and the times that it will take. So it's not just about having it up front in the tenancy agreement, it's also about how you then manage the situation when it might arise. Hey, look, that's pretty much all the time we have today. We've gone through for our 40 minutes. I just want to again thank both Richard and David for coming along and sharing your views and opinions. It's great to have the insights and case studies that you've provided for fixed and also for periodic. We're going through a bit of change in the industry at the minute with obviously the interest rates and the impact. And we're also got changes coming up next year with the changes in the Act, proposed changes in the Act. So lots more to discuss. I'm sure we're going to have lots more webinars this year with the two of you joining and participating in some way, shape or form. Thank you for your time today. And thank you to the participants and also for those that put forward the questions as well. And on that note, we will sign off and we will have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.